What is up, y'all? Welcome back to episode 76 of That's No Moon Pod. Been sitting here thinking, trying to process episode 3 of The Acolyte that just dropped. Leading up to this episode, there had already been a lot of talk regarding some things that may or may not be going down, some lore changes, some possible just other things that people had said who had already seen episodes 3 and 4. So there had already been a whole lot of leaks, a whole lot of rumors on what could possibly go down. So going into it, I had my guard up, just kind of waiting, bracing for impact, if you will. It wasn't as bad as what I had been hearing online, and I feel like a lot of the reactions so far are justified. You have a right to your opinion no matter what. I tend to find myself, at least right now, I don't think it was the craziest lore damaging, if you will. I think we still gotta wait and see how exactly the rest of the story kind of plays out. But let's just kind of go over what exactly went down. Full spoilers if you haven't seen episode 3 yet. So, this whole episode pretty much is the whole backstory, the lead up to where we eventually see the twins, Osha and May, and kind of how exactly they get involved in their lives from where we see them. And the way it kind of starts off is we see them as young girls. Osha's using some sort of force ability on some kind of insect, and then May comes along and she kind of uses her force abilities to kind of, I want to say torture the insect, but she's kind of being more malevolent to the insect, and Osha tells her to stop. So they're really trying to get the point across, saying Osha is the good twin and May really is this, I want to say, well, I guess you can say evil version. She's the darker version of the twins. And they live in this sanctuary in this mountain with this clan of witches. Not like the witches of Dathomir, but similar in some sort of ways. They practice these force rituals and they're kind of waiting on this ceremony to eventually turn the twins into full on witches. And again, leading into this episode, I was really curious to see how exactly a lot of the rumors and leaks were going to play out on screen. And the big one was they were going to implement that the twins were birthed by the Force using some kind of dark magic from the witches. It's not fully explained at all in the episode. A lot of the things so far in the show have been really vague, trying to make you think a certain way and try to make us put the pieces together ourselves. And that's exactly what they do in this episode, where we see the mother of the twins, or one of the mothers, who we've seen in the trailers leading up. She's the one who says, this isn't about good or evil, this is about power and who's allowed to use it. We see that she is with this Zabrak looking witch, and they're both just trying to gather up the twins and get them prepared for the ceremony to turn them into witches later on in the episode. So throughout, we're seeing this whole kind of conflict between the two, where May is fully engulfed in their teachings and she's ready to do whatever needs to be done to become a witch, like her mothers and like the rest of her clan. But Osha, on the other hand, doesn't want to follow on the same path. She doesn't want to become a witch at all. She'd rather just do her own thing and not always have to do what her sister May is doing. And of course, the witches are trying to persuade her to follow along with her sister and just kind of go along with all these teachings and practices. There's a scene where the mother's kind of going over the force and they're using these force push abilities on these other witches, and we see the mother try to force push the twins, and then Osha kind of runs behind May, and May kind of blocks back with the force against her mother. So again, they're really trying to get the point across that May is the dark and Osha is the light, kind of like this yin and yang type of deal going on. And again, the whole episode, we're just leading up to this ceremony. But beforehand, we get this interesting conversation between the two mothers of the twins, and they're kind of talking back and forth. And again, this is all leading up to the ceremony. And we find out that the Zabrak witch actually carried the twins, and the main mother of the witches and the twins somehow conjured by the force or some kind of dark magic so that the twins could eventually be born. So the Zabrak witch carried them, and the main mother used the force or whatever to create them. And right away, it makes you think about Anakin and how Anakin had his mom, but never had a father, and was somehow created by the Force to eventually become the chosen one. And that was kind of like the main rumor or leak that had been going around, talking about, is the Force female now officially? Are they completely changing the lore and kind of ruining what was set up later on in the prequels with Anakin and him being the special chosen one to have been birthed by the Force and for him to eventually set out on bringing balance to the galaxy. And again, I'm not fully sold on the fact that it completely changes fully all the lore and on how exactly the Force works. And I don't think it necessarily fully ruins Anakin, but I do feel some type of way about it still, to where I think I always thought it was so cool how Anakin was somehow birthed by the Force, and it was kind of the Force and just destiny, if you will, for him to have been born without a father and for him to eventually be found by Qui-Gon, and that kind of sets him on the path to eventually being the chosen one and having Luke and Leia, and that just kind of eventually is what helps take out the Sith. So I do think in some type of way it does diminish that whole thing with Anakin in a way, unless they're gonna do some type of thing to where it kind of ties in somehow, and maybe there is some sort of Plagueis tie-in. Um, I'm not fully sure on what to think exactly, but I'm not gonna fully just jump to conclusions and say this or that. It ruined this, and everything's all messed up now. Still gotta wait and see what exactly happens. But getting back to episode 3 with the whole ceremony thing, again, Osha and May are getting ready. Osha's being real hesitant. She doesn't want to go through with it. And once the ceremony kind of kicks off, we see the mother conjure up this thing from the Force or whatever, and she kind of gives the marking that we eventually see on May's forehead with the kind of looks like just like a bunch of circles, like a what do you call it, like a maze type of deal, circular maze. And right as soon as they're about to get to Osha, that's when the Jedi come barging in. And at the beginning of the episode, we had seen when the two twins were out talking and doing the whole thing with the insect. Soul had been following them and kind of keeping out of sight. So we knew that the Jedi were there already before they came barging in the ceremony, waiting for some reason. Now, whether or not, well, I guess I'll get into that here in a little bit. But once the Jedi kind of come in and interrupt the ceremony, they're trying to get the kids, and they're telling the witches, we know there's kids here, and you know you're not allowed to be teaching these kids these sort of ways with the Force. So I guess kind of implying that the Jedi really are the only people allowed within the galaxy to take upon children to eventually teach them within the Jedi ways, or at least teach them with the Force. And of course, the witches are denying that the kids are there, but they know they're there. Soul saw them at the beginning of the episode. And Osha steps forward, and they kind of have this cool interaction with Soul. Soul hands her his lightsaber for some reason, which kind of got me a little nervous, but I feel like he fully trusted Osha in the moment and could kind of sense that she's not evil. She doesn't have cruel intentions like her sister. And they're all trying to get the witches to let the twins decide whether or not if they want to come with them to eventually become Jedi, and for them to do these tests on them the next day. And there's this crazy scene to where we see all the Jedi that May is trying to kill from episodes 1 and 2. We see Carrie Ann Moss. She's kind of the one leading the pack. The Wookiee Jedi, and Torben, the Jedi who was meditating and the one who eventually drinks the poison and kills himself. Except here, he's a young Padawan. And there's this crazy moment to where they kind of having this little argument between them and the witches, and the main mother uses her dark magic with Torben and kind of takes over his mind. His eyes go black and pretty much takes full control over him. So you're seeing this headbutting between the two to where they both have these different points of view of the force and kind of how they want to use them or how to use the force. So I kind of like that whole conflict between the two to where there's got to be so many different people throughout the galaxy who obviously use the force in different ways, and the Jedi have always felt like their way was the right way, and how they use the force is the way that everyone should use the force. But then that's how you get the Sith, that's how you get these dark side users to where other groups want to use the force for their own purposes and possibly conjure up these dark powers. And at this point, you can kind of tell that the Jedi have gone through things. If you've read the High Republic books or comic books, you know that they fought these dark force users before, and you get the feeling that at this certain point in the show, in this time period, that they're done with that. They don't want any kind of dark force users roaming around teaching the kids their dark magic, because that could eventually lead them into creating some other enemies for the Jedi to have to face and have to worry about. So they're trying to paint this picture that maybe the Jedi don't have the right point of view. Maybe they're too power hungry or want too much control over the Force and who can use it. So I kind of like that element and what the show's trying to tell. But back to the episode to where the twins eventually go and test with the Jedi, and they're supposed to lie. They kind of make this whole deal to where Osha and May are gonna go in, do the testing with the Jedi, but they're gonna lie on purpose and fail on purpose, so that way the Jedi can kind of see or tell that okay, maybe they're not as force sensitive as we thought. And May goes first, and she obviously fails on purpose. She kind of has like this smirk on her face to Osha before she walks in, and Torben takes a blood sample, kind of like Qui-Gon did with Anakin on Tatooine, and Soul and Carrie Moss do like that whole classic Jedi test that they did with Anakin at the Jedi Temple, to where he has like this monitor with different images on it, and Osha has to tell Soul what's on the image without seeing it, just by using the Force. And she's trying to lie on purpose, but they know that she's lying to them. But they're doing something back at her to where she's saying the wrong image on purpose, but they're telling her that she got it right. And she says pretty much, wait, that wasn't what it was, kind of giving it away that she was lying on purpose. And that kind of just leads into the whole thing to where she wants to train to be a Jedi. She doesn't want to follow the path of the witches with her sister. And this is pretty much where everything kind of goes crazy, to where we go back to their sanctuary and Osha and May are talking, and May's pissed off because Osha's going to end up leaving with the Jedi to begin her training. And May's pissed off, obviously. And this kind of just happens abruptly and out of nowhere, to where May's saying, you're not going to leave. I'm not going to let you leave. I'm just going to kill you instead. And winds up setting fire to Osha's room outside and trapping Osha inside to herself. And then this big fire starts to happen, and Osha's trying to figure out a way to escape. And there's like this secret tunnel that she goes through, and she winds up seeing that pretty much the whole inside to where her home is, the whole mountain is pretty much engulfed. Everything's crumbling down, everything's just falling apart at this point. And she's running away. There's a whole bunch of witches' bodies everywhere. Everything's crumbling down. And there comes to a point to where Osha may come face to face on this bridge that's kind of separated in the middle. And they kind of have like this stare down, still kind of bickering at each other. And then May's side of the bridge crumbles down. And right before Osha's falls, here comes Soul running through, and he ends up catching her before she falls down and saves her. And they're all running through the inside of their compound or whatever. And we see her mother laying there dead. And all these witches again are all just kind of scattered around together. Doesn't seem like they got completely just hit by a bunch of rubble and just rocks or whatever. Kind of seems like something else kind of may have went down, which I'll kind of get into here in a little bit. But Soul rescues Osha, and then Osha wakes up on their ship with a breathing mask on or whatever. And Soul comes over, kind of talk to her, and then we see in the background Carrie Ann Moss and Torben, and they're both in the background, out of focus slightly, but you could see on Torben on his face that he's got like these scars and these cuts now, and they're the same scars and cuts that we see him from episode 2, to where he's just floating there like an old man, but he has all these scars on his face near his eyes and cheeks. And we see him in the background of this episode. They're pretty fresh, making us think that something went down with the Jedi and the witches. And Soul's trying to comfort Osha, telling her, if you want, you could be trained as my Padawan. I'll teach you my ways. You'll never have to feel like this ever again. You'll be safe with us. And that's pretty much where this episode ends. But getting back to the whole thing with Torben and his face being all messed up and whatnot, and kind of going back to the whole deal with the fire and the rubble with the and the witches laying there dead. This whole thing is making everyone think that something else went down. That fire that May started, there's absolutely no way that that fire completely engulfed their compound and that mountain and did all that destruction, all from that little fire that May started outside of their room. So, again, the show's doing these things on purpose to make us try to put all these pieces together ourselves and making us think what exactly happened, what exactly is going down. And I don't have a full on theory on what exactly I think may have happened. It seems like, because again, Soul was already there, kind of spying, if you will, on the twins before they all kind of come in during that ceremony. And the Jedi obviously aren't happy that these witches are teaching these children these dark arts within the Force. I'm not so sure if they know fully yet if they were created using this dark magic with the Force. They may know that, they may not, but I'm assuming they do because there's just something off between the Jedi and these witches to where obviously they have different beliefs on how to use the Force and the power that it wields. I'm just trying to figure out what would make the Jedi barge in and possibly destroy the witch's entire compound and pretty much just wipe them out completely. I don't know if I'm gonna like it if they wind up trying to paint these Jedi as being somewhat evil to where they kind of take matters in their own hands too much to try to prevent any kind of dark side users popping up at any time. Because I honestly don't see the Jedi just strolling back in there and setting fire to these witches' compound and killing all of them just, just to eventually take these kids for themselves. I feel like there's something else kind of going on that's going to try to make us think that the Jedi may have done all this selfishly, but they're definitely not telling us the full story. Again, with the whole scars and cuts on Torben's face, they definitely ran into some trouble with the witches or possibly someone else. So both sides have been lying somehow, some way. And again, yeah, I'm just trying to. I don't fully know exactly how to feel about the show. I feel like some of the writing is sloppy at times. I feel like the two twins, the kid versions at least, the acting wasn't the best, but again, they're child actors, so I'll give them the I'll give them the slide on that. Um, but I do like what they're doing with the Force and kind of making it seem like, yeah, there's gonna be different sectors of the universe or the galaxy that practice with the Force, but in different ways. And the Jedi obviously don't want the Sith popping back up or any kind of dark force users to possibly be a threat to them. And so they're kind of going throughout the galaxy to try to prevent any of these things from happening, while also trying to recruit these kids to eventually become Jedi of their own. I just think it's kind of weird to where some things just don't add up with what was already set up with the prequels, with existing lore already. Um, because the twins are pretty much the same age as what Anakin was in the Phantom Menace, and the Jedi were not wanting to train this kid because he was too old. But here in this show, the Jedi are fully accepting of the fact that we're willing to train these kids no matter how old they are for whatever reason. It could just be that they don't want them to go down that path of the dark side of the force. So they're just willing to take them in as their own no matter what age they are. But you get what I'm saying, to where just these things kind of say contradict themselves, but they just kind of don't exactly flow as well as I think that it should. Um, and the showrunners, the writers, everyone involved in the show, they gotta know that as well, that everything, or at least some things in this show, are going to stir up controversy, possibly just kind of question what has already been set up in previous movies and lore. But my whole thinking with this show so far is that the audience score, and you see on the whole Rotten Tomatoes score, to where the critics are digging it, but the audience score is completely lopsided. It's like in the 20%. And I'd like to think that if I'm CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, and he sees that, okay, we just dropped $180 million on this show, we can't just make a show that has any kind of conflict with, obviously, the casual viewers, but also the hardcore Star Wars fans. If you're going to drop that kind of money on a show, you have got to make it appeal to everyone, and you got to make it a banger. You cannot have a show like this that's so controversial on what may or may not be being said, whether if it's the force is female or the changing of any kind of lore. If I'm Bob Iger, I'm saying, look, I'm dropping this dough on this show. You got to make this to where it's everyone's talking about it in a good way. It can't be this divisive thing to where we have one half of the audience that's completely bashing it or not even watching it, and another portion of the fan base that is liking it. You got to make it somehow appeal to everyone watching it, and you want to make people want to tune into the show and not feel like they're being force fed any kind of agenda or any kind of anything that could possibly just, put the fan base at any more at odds with each other, like they've haven't already been like that. It's just the way that things have been going for Star Wars for so long now at this point. You would think that with this show, they had an opportunity to possibly tell a story from a certain timeline that we haven't yet seen before, in live action at least, and have this sort of freedom to kind of just tell a story that could get just the casual, the hardcore, and newcomers of the franchise to want to tune in and be talking about the show in a certain light that makes you think, man, I see why they spent all that money on this show. And so far, I feel like it just has not lived up to the expectation of $180 million show. And it's disappointing just on that fact alone. Again, we're not even halfway through the season yet. So things could completely turn around and make a whole lot of sense, and we look back on these episodes and this whole series as a whole and think, wow, they actually did something cool and made something new while also kind of tying certain things up with what we've already known with the lore. But so far, it's not looking like that. It looks like they're trying to go in a completely different route. They want us to think a certain type of way about the Jedi, about the Force, and I don't think that was the smartest move to be doing a show like this, especially after just what's been going on with Star Wars lately. Um, yeah, I just don't think it's the smartest idea. I don't think the writing has been as good as I was hoping for. Because if you remember when the show was first announced years ago, I remember hearing about the show possibly being kind of how the Sith kind of came to be, or more following along the lines of more of the dark side users. And there is some elements to the show, but I kind of have a feeling that there was some sort of, say, rewrites or some kind of just change in direction to where they decided to kind of focus on these two twins and kind of making us feel like possibly the Jedi don't always do the right thing, to where maybe the Jedi just aren't always these good people throughout the galaxy that want to enforce the good side throughout the galaxy, to maybe kind of paint them in a certain picture to where maybe they're not the people who we've always kind of thought they were. And yeah, this show just has me feeling all sorts of type of ways and thinking I don't know what to think right now. But I mean, again, the critics are digging it. I see a lot of people online when I go through the comments saying that they really dug this episode. They're really digging the show so far. Um, but I just find myself more and more confused on not only just what exactly is going on in the show, but just really just how I don't know how to feel, to be honest. I'm gonna keep tuning in. I'm gonna keep watching because I do want to see how this whole thing plays out. Whether or not it does have some sort of tie-ins with Anakin or Plagueis or I gotta see how just things turn out. I'm not gonna completely bail on the show because I am interested just on how certain things play out with the Jedi and with these two twins. Even though I'm not fully on board with a lot of the things that have been going on so far, I just gotta see how it all plays out. I gotta see how it all ends. But again, yeah, I just think the show has not done itself any favors, especially some of the interviews with some of the actors that have gone on recently. I'm sure you've all seen by now the what is his name? Torg, or the one Jedi who had his shirt off, one of the early episodes. Um that they had that whole junket interview with him, and he was talking about to where he said Anakin blew up the Death Star, and he was getting clowned big time by all the fans and the comics and whatnot. And Leslie Headland, the showrunner, and Amanda Stenberg, the actress who plays Osha and May, the twins, they had this interesting conversation to where Amanda says that nerds are gay, and Leslie Headland saying that she's thought that R2D2 is a lesbian, and the whole conversation is just odd to begin with. Um, and that obviously stirred up a whole bunch of controversy throughout the fandom. Um, it's weird that we're having these sort of conversations regarding Star Wars, saying that nerds are gay or that R2D2 is a lesbian. Um, I didn't necessarily take any offense to anything that was said, but I do think it's just a little odd to be saying that nerds are gay or R2 is a lesbian, even though the whole conversation was a little bit more on the joking matter. Um, you just gotta know what you're saying and who you're saying it to and what could be possibly just be stirred up within the fandom and within the comments, and how these sort of statements aren't going to go well with everyone. And just going back to what I was saying with the whole Bob Iger and spending all this money with the show, you gotta want to appeal to everyone in the show. You can't piss off a certain point of view of people that have different sorts of just ideologies or whatnot. You gotta try to make everyone want to watch the show, and not whether it's perfect purpose, if it's on purpose or not. You got to get everyone on board in this show, and so far, I think the actors and what has been said, some of the writing, the showrunners, just kind of everything regarding the show has not been to please the majority or everyone. Feels like they're kind of going for this certain group of people, and honestly, it's kind of just because if you're not liking the show, or if you have any kind of criticisms towards anything, Kathleen Kennedy or whatnot, they try to paint this picture on, oh, you're this or you're that, you're racist or you're homophobic or you're sexist or whatever, when that's completely not the case. You can't just try to paint this picture of a group of fans who have criticisms on your shows that you're making, because everyone has a right to their opinions. And even though, yeah, there is going to be these disgusting people out there who have these points of views of, there is sexist people, there are racist people out there, but those fans shouldn't have any sort of weight on any things on this property. Those people are just disgusting. And the thing is, when you try to paint a picture on people who just have regular criticisms on what's going on, you can't try to paint them as those groups of people. There's constructive criticism going on, and that should be fully encouraged if the show isn't living up to our standards. Um, it's just crazy to see all the controversies and all the different talks in the comments and with the fans that this show has created. It's all feels like it's been boiling up and leading to sort of like a show like this, and it's finally here, and now you're starting to see people really speak their minds on it. And I'm hoping that Disney and Bob Iger kind of see all this going on and try to take this franchise in a direction that the fans have really been wanting to see it go. Whether or not that's giving the boot to Kathleen Kennedy, because I think what she's done so far doesn't justify for her to continue to be the head of Lucasfilm. I think at this point, her track record speaks for herself. Um, I don't feel like she has the best ideas for what I think the fans want this franchise to be. Seems like she's really tough to work with. We've seen plenty of showrunners and creators sign on and then eventually leave the project. And we've seen plenty of different movies and series to where the script completely changes and just things get switched around, and the story obviously takes a hit on that as well. So I just think they got a completely clean house, whether that's giving the keys to Filoni and Favreau completely. Something's got to be done, because right now things are just not looking good. And I know I kind of went on a little ramble or a rant the past couple minutes, but that's just what this show has done so far. But again, I'm going to keep tuning in. I'm still intrigued enough to see what comes next. But y'all let me know what y'all thought of the episode. What are y'all thinking of the show so far as a whole? And where do you think things are going to go from here? Leave a comment, like this video, hit subscribe, follow me on IG and Snapchat. I'm posting new release comic books and variant covers for free. Links will be down in the description. But until next week, y'all stay safe, and I'll catch y'all on the flip. Peace.